Everything is about to change for the Houston Texans with the season right around the corner. In this video, we're going to talk a lot about the expectations for this team. If they can get over the 10-7 hump and actually prove to be one of the better teams in the NFL this year. So we're going to discuss all of it right here on Texans Digest. Hello, everybody. I am your host for this episode, Donovan Ricondo, and we appreciate you joining us as always. And if you have not yet hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do so now. If you want to stay up to date on all of your Texans content, we are got videos for you guys every single one of these days heading into the season. So go ahead, hit that button below. But as far as today, we are talking about expectations for this Houston Texans team. There's a lot of things that have changed within this team from just 1 year ago, from new offensive coordinator to a brand new receiving core, as well as a whole different offensive line. There's so much change within this organization, change that absolutely needed to be made. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and get to a little bit of what we're talking about for today. Expectations for the Texans as are favored to win the AFC South for a third straight season with a team led by young stars Stroud and Will Anderson. Stroud's strong first 2 years helped the Texans turn things around, and this year they'll try to reach the playoffs in three straight seasons for the first time in franchise history. And it's crazy to think that this team has not made the playoffs 3 years in a row. We are the youngest NFL franchise, but at some point we should have expected to have a good enough team to make the playoffs three straight seasons. And so with CJ Stroud now in the mix, that is a great indication. You have a very solid QB, a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. So it's good to have him on your side and to put us in this position, a position that has not been familiar for Texans fans. And as far as the defensively, Will Anderson should take another step forward in his second year playing with veteran Daniil Hunter after the third overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, had 17 sacks combined in his first two seasons. Cornerback Derek Stingley returns to lead a talented young secondary after earning first-team AP All-Pro honors last season when he had 5 interceptions and defended 18 passes. And I can say without a doubt that the Texans defense next year is going to be a top 3 defense in the NFL. They are absolutely stacked from top to bottom, to that line, to the secondary. Everything is in motion for this team to have another great year defensively. It was why we were kept in a lot of the games last year. Defense saved our butts a whole lot of those when the offensive line and CJ Stroud were not clicking together. The defense is what kept us in those games, and this defense just got a whole lot better. Of course, you add C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who had a little bit of an injury scare, is not as bad as originally thought. So once he starts to be in the mix, that is just going to be another threat in terms of interceptions, in terms of the secondary as well. That's going to put this team in a better position at the defensive end. Now, I want to take a look a little bit at our schedule for this season, because I don't think I've personally done a breakdown of what exactly is a reasonable record for this team, and if that record is something that this team can surpass. So again, we have our schedule right here. We start off with the Los Angeles Rams, which are a very good team, one of the best teams in the NFL, probably in the top 10 or so. It starts with the Rams, the Bucks, division rivals, the Jaguars and Titans, followed by the Ravens, and then our first bye week, then the Seahawks, 49ers, Broncos, Jaguars, Titans, Bills, Colts, Chiefs, Cardinals, and the Raiders, and then the Chargers. And then to wrap up the season, you get the Indianapolis Colts. And so this is in my opinion, a very interesting schedule for the Texans because it starts off with an absolute bang. You play two pretty solid NFC teams, the Buccaneers and the Los Angeles Rams, both kind of good teams, but also kind of sneaky good. And so those first 2 weeks, I wouldn't be surprised if the Texans were in a position where they really are not yet themselves. Their identity has not yet been found. I'm not saying that they're going to go 0-2 for those games, but they're going to be very, very tough battles if they want to come out with a win. Then you get a little bit of an easier opponent with the Jags, the Titans, who are projected to be the least likely team to make the Super Bowl this year. So fingers crossed on that one. But you also have teams like the Ravens and the Chiefs and the Bills who are in your regular season lineup, and teams that CJ Stroud and the Texans are going to have to eventually, at some point, prove that they can beat them. They were able to do it last year against Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, so that was a great indication and a good step forward. But to able to beat the Chiefs and to be able to beat the Ravens in a match in a game that hasn't really happened, right? Like we've played them in the playoffs, we've lost to them in the previous 2 seasons, and so that isn't exactly the best thing for Texans fans. Can they win the big games? And that's not been proven yet, right? We've been able to win the wild card round. We're wild card kings, quite frankly. But that divisional, that conference championship, which we still have not reached, those are the games that we need to be able to play in for one, but also win. And so that is done by playing these key marquee games throughout the season against those really good teams to prove that you belong in those situations. And so I look at this right here. The Texans are the best, or the highest likely team in the AFC South to win the Super Bowl. Of course, there's a lot of other teams that are very good this season that have a better chance than the Texans that you see there. The Eagles, the Ravens, Bills, Chiefs, the typical lineup of teams that are supposed to be one of the better teams. But the Houston Texans, and this seems to be a pattern every single year. The Houston Texans were not really necessarily one of the top teams to win a Super Bowl, but we're always kind of in the mix. We're kind of just there at the back end of those good teams. There's not a bad team on this list right here, but it's never been able to get past that. The Texans have never been able to prove to the league, to prove to the people in Las Vegas that they are a serious threat to winning the Super Bowl, to winning the a divisional game, to make a conference championship. The Texans have yet to do that. And so I ask the question again, can this be the year that the Texans get to that land, a land that they have not yet crossed? And so when you think about that and you think about this team, there's still a lot of questions as to if they can, right? There are still a lot of things that have changed in the span of last season to now. Again, you do get a new offensive coordinator, so maybe that is a blessing in disguise. But I also don't expect for it to work magically right at the start, right? I feel like that is something that is still going to be worked on throughout the year. Of course, you have the offensive line. Same thing with that. It's a brand new offensive line. Yes, you traded away Laramie Tunsil, your best offensive lineman, and you sent him to Washington. And a lot of people did not like that move. I personally am somewhat ambivalent towards it. Laramie Tunsil is a very talented offensive lineman. Personally, I was always just sick of the penalties, which is why I was like, okay, I'm down for the restart. I'm down for just reinventing the whole line. I get it on some level and get something in return, but at the same time, there are still questions about this offensive line. And if they can do what the last year's offensive line couldn't do for CJ Stroud, just give him some time, right? It doesn't have to be 10 seconds. It just needs to be enough for CJ Stroud to go out and make a play, or for Nick Chubb or Damian Pierce or Joe Mixon, whenever he gets back, to go ahead and run for some decent yardage. So those are the questions that still remain for this Houston Texans team. But with all that being said, right, there is still one thing that is on the Texans side when it comes to making the playoffs and when it comes to proving to be a good team, and that is the division. We'll take it, right? Well, like let's be so real. The AFC South, besides us, is a trash division. Like, we are probably the worst division in the NFL as of right now. There aren't a lot of good teams in it. I mean, there's only 4 teams. The Colts have been struggling for a while. We're going to see what's the case with Anthony Richardson and what their whole deal with. You have the Tennessee Titans, who I said, again, were the least likely team to win the Super Bowl this year. And then you have the Jaguars, who also aren't, the hottest team right now either, although they did just get Travis Hunter, and you also have Trevor Lawrence in there. Maybe they can finally make something happen somehow. But at the same time, the division, the AFC South, is ultimately just helps the Texans. They can be a little mediocre and still win the division title. Now, is that something that I'm super fond of? Not necessarily. I'm always one who likes more competition, because that is what makes you better. That is what sharpens the iron for you come playoff time. So I do think there are downsides when it comes to that, but at the same time, it allows some room for the Texans players to kind of figure out their offense, figure out their offensive line, figure out their defense if there's any holes in that as well. It makes injuries a little less of a bad thing. Of course, injuries are always bad, but when you're playing 6 games against teams that aren't necessarily the best, right? That is kind of a blessing, right? Like you have to admit that playing these teams are a little bit of a help. Now, I'm not saying we're going to go 6-0 in the division. I'm not saying that. Anything can happen in the NFL. Any team can beat any team. But from a statistical standpoint and from a what would I rather prefer? Would I rather to play in the AFC South or a very competitive AFC North or what have you, right? It is a fortunate thing for us to not be in a division in terms of playoff seeding. Now, in terms of how good this team can actually be, that is a big question because when I look at this schedule, right? When I look at the schedule, I look at it and I am interested to see if the Texans can get over this 10-7 hump. I see them and I look at the schedule and I feel like this is another 10-7 season incoming. I originally thought 11-6, but at the same time I was like, I err on the side of caution, 10-7. But can this team surpass 10 wins on this season? Because you do play a lot of really good teams. Like I said, you play the Chiefs, you play the Bills, you play the Ravens, you play the Los Angeles Rams week 1. Are you going to be ready for week 1? Are you going to be as prepared as Matthew Stafford and company? You also have teams like the 49ers who are, also one of the favorites to do some damage this year in the league. And so there's a lot of questions on whether or not the Houston Texans can beat these good teams and stay relevant in terms of what a good team is in the NFL. I think their defense absolutely is. Their defense is absolutely elite. It is a top 3 defense in the NFL. I'm going to keep saying that because I have full faith in this defense. But at the same time, can the offense figure things out? I love the wide receiver room. I'm a big fan of it. I can't wait to see how all that works out. But again, can this new offensive scheme and can this O-line keep things together and keep these Texans, these players healthy and in the best position to win games every single week of the NFL season? So I want you guys to let me know in the comments. Do you think with the schedule that we had that the Texans can get past 10 wins on this season? Let me know in the comments. I've been your host, Donovan Ricondo. We'll see you on the next one of Texans Digest. And if you have not yet subscribed and you want to stay up to date on your favorite H-Town team, this is the channel for you. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button below. We'll see you next one. See ya.